Ignatius, it is fascinating and bizarre that these House Republicans, and it was what I was talking about in the Atlantic column, they've switched sides with leftists from the 60s. They hate the FBI. They hate the Department of Justice. They and their allies actually call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs a stupid pig. If that doesn't sound like something shouted by a group that's trying to levitate the Pentagon in 1968-69, they've changed sides. And this is such a political loser. You do wonder why Kevin McCarthy or others can't step forward and say, guys, women, back off. This is going to cost us control of the House.
Joe, I think you know the answer better than I. Your Republican Party has become a populist, anti-elitist party, and it wants to blame everything on elitist politicians who got us into this mess, on blue state Democrats and all the things that they do wrong. It wants to focus on cultural issues. President Biden is a president who actually is trying to make the political system work, passing infrastructure legislation, getting things done that, affect our ability to make semiconductor chips and our ability to compete in the world economy. He didn't get much credit for that. One thing I find when I look at the polling is that Americans on both sides of the aisle say we're going in the wrong direction as a country. And to get back to the way we started this hour, I think your article in the Atlantic is right in arguing the person who can lead the country's got to be the person who says things aren't that bad in America. We are not as crippled and broken a country as you hear from Republicans and sometimes from Democrats too. We're actually a pretty strong country. That message, weirdly, in this time of division, seems very, very difficult to.
David, okay, welcome. It is Monday, 10 July, Year of Lord 2023. That individual right there is a mouthpiece for the CIA, FBI, National Security State, David Ignatius, who's just a cipher that just pushed the information, the narratives of the deep state and the administrative state, a complete total hack. On Morning Joe this morning, but he said the quiet part out loud, the Republican Party has become a populist, anti-elitist party, and we're ascendant, and that's what's got him freaked out. I want to bring in one of the true heroes in our country today, Royce White. Yesterday, can we show the still and put it up on the whole screen so we can see it in all its glory? Yesterday on national television during the Big Three basketball game, where Royce was the big star in it. Can we get that up? Okay, fine. Anytime during the show today would be great. That would be like during the 6 to 7 o'clock show when I'm introducing Royce White, the guest. Royce had a stencil on his head, and people know, having seen Royce do this before, oftentimes he's calling to free the Uyghurs, anti-CCP. He's got messages about populist nationalism and the oppressed throughout the world. He actually had right there, Trump won. And, of course, it caused a total meltdown. Thank you, Memphis, for getting up there. Just kidding. Trump won. Let me bring in Royce White. Royce, are you still a member of the Big Three Basketball League? The CBS, rumor has it CBS was going to pull the contract after you got out there. And by the way, star turn yesterday, sir.
Yeah, no, CBS was good with it, I think. I mean, CBS showed it. They could have panned the camera away. It's probably be a little bit difficult given that I was, one of the better performers in the game yesterday afternoon. So, but we haven't heard any feedback yet. And I saw Ice Cube before the game, and he had a nice chuckle at it. He was entertained by it. So I think he loves the controversy, and rightfully so. We need controversy in this country right now.
Talk to me about David Ignatius, that all the ills from the Morning Joe set is because the Republican parties turned to a populist, anti-elitist party. It's one of the reasons you ran as a Republican candidate in a primary in Minneapolis. But is David Ignatius right? Is the Republican Party turned to be a populist, anti-elitist? And is that the cause of all the problems of the country? Is the Republican Party shift to that until we have a a warrior like Royce White stenciling on his skull Trump won as kind of an FU to the mainstream media, sir?
Yeah, no, well, the problem in the country is the elites, and the problem in the country, in our country, is the establishment and the administrative state, and everything that's come to be accepted as the norm with this corrupt status quo. And so, if populism is the default turn away from that corrupt status quo, of course, the people who perpetuated the status quo are going to say it's the issue. I mean, it's just a patented dishonest and dishonorable move, dishonest and dishonorable narrative from dishonorable people and people with no sacred honor, no national honor. So I don't even take Ignatius seriously. I mean, it's like a puppet out there talking in the wind. But you know, as with regards to the Republican Party, I think that the grassroots movement, the grassroots Republican voter bloc, is certainly a populist movement. It's certainly energized and inspired by Donald Trump and all the work that he's done, all the work that you've done, and the rest of the nationalist populist movement. So I think there's a movement in the grassroots. The problem is going to be syncing it up with the higher ups in the machinery of the Republican Party. I know in Minnesota we certainly have three national committee men that are as uniparty gets. So once we weed them out, then we'll be on the fast track to saving the nation.
And by the way, I'm calling for my producers. I want to make sure we play the grassroots. I want to have that spot ready for the grassroots that we played last week, or I think it was on Saturday. I played on the Saturday show. I want to make sure we get that booted up. Just let me know. I want to go back to something because David Ignatius is a long-term columnist for the Washington Post. He is known as a mouthpiece for the CIA, for DNI, for the FBI, DOJ. He's always putting forward their narratives and giving it that patina of officialness by putting it in the Washington Post. He said this populist anti-elitist takeover of the Republican Party, they always want to dismiss it with the code word, and all they want to do is focus on cultural issues, which is the term they use. Just a bunch of a white heterosexual Christian nationalist patriarchy. That's the code word. Yeah. Brother Royce White, correct me if I'm wrong. I think one of the leading things, I continue to hear you on your podcast when you first came to public attention, you're very much focused on the economic issues. The cultures too, don't get me wrong, but you're leading, sitting there going, the problem we got with the system is that the guys that run the system have a printing machine that can do, called the Federal Reserve, that can print up any amount of money they want at any time they want. And that's the beating heart of it. Does Ignatius and Joe Scarborough, do they have to box in populist anti-elitists by just saying we're a bunch of rubes, white nationalist rubes that are angry that women are getting too mouthy and want to run the country? Or is it really the focus here on populist nationalism fundamentally get down to economics and class?
Well, there is a set of cultural issues that are the huge problem. I think the cultural issues that they want to frame the political dialogue around aren't the real cultural issues. They're issues. They're cultural issues that people get very passionate about, and they're significant. They matter. But the real cultural issue, the biggest cultural issue in this country, is that our elites are corrupt and the economic policy is corrupt. The entire economic Ponzi scheme is which is exactly what it is. From any number of industrial complexes. You could say media, you could say medicine, you could certainly say military, but at the bottom of it, this sort of international banking cartel and these international cosmopolitan omnisexuals that we've come to be governed by. And they're just breaking the back of the American working class. And it's very obvious, it's very blatant, it's very despicable. And the whole scam is predicated on them being able to distract people with the cultural issues they say we're hung up on. But when a black man like me stands up and says, wait a second here. What about the moral hazard? They go, oh, well, what school were you accredited by? What economic institution did you go to? Or, what'd you get on your math score on the ACT? But then they'll say the ACTs are racist. So, I mean, these people aren't even serious. I don't know how these people have come to run the country, but we better get it out of their hands quick, or else we're going to die as a nation, and people are going to actually die in real life as they've done already.
Cuba's becoming part of this also, and Cube, correct me if I'm wrong, Cube's whole plan is an economic plan. He leaves the economics, and I think RFK Jr., who obviously doesn't agree with us or MAGA in a ton of issues, but sees the administrative state and the deep state is like Donald Trump said. Trump said, hey, the most existential threat we have, we love Bannon and these guys, but it's not the CCP. The most existential threat is the administrative state and the deep state because they're actually in cahoots with the CCP. But you have Cube there who's all about economics. Then you got RFK there who's saying, hey, he wants to take on the biomedical institutions, the national security institutions, all of it. You're seeing a new politics that's not just dealing with the culture issues. They continue want us to say culture issues as a code word for rube, white, rural, Christian, heterosexual, male, nationalist, that are just focused on their wives being too mouthy, sir.
Yeah. Well, look, let's just be frank. Women have become too mouthy. As the black man in the room, I'll say that. I don't know whether we're talking white men or Asian men or black men or so on and so forth. But no, I mean, I'm serious. I mean, there was, and the thing that is scary about it, and I say this, and people will go, "Oh,
hold
well,
it, hold it." Can I officially say that Joy Reid's Black Girl Magic does not work with Royce White? Can we just?
Yeah, no.
I just want to make sure.
No.
Hey, don't take it from me. I just want Royce to say it.
Dog. You know you're gonna send me off. You go to Joy Ann Reid and she's wearing a white woman's wigs. You're gonna piss me off this afternoon. I'm having a beautiful day without thinking about that scam. But what I'll say is, you take a operation like the Rockefeller Foundation and their grassroots fundamental support and sponsorship of the early women's rights movement and their involvement with the inception of the Federal Reserve and the ability of the Federal Reserve to tax the American working class twice with the insertion of women into the workplace. Now, I know we could look at World War II and say, hey, women had to step into the workplace because of the war. But when you look at the inception of the war, there might have been an economic incentive there as well. So, I mean, these things have a history. And the people like Joy Ann Reid, they're banking on the fact that the modern American citizen is too hard up financially, too demoralized spiritually, and too busy in their everyday logistics, whether it be with family or kids or, God forbid, going to the next Brazilian butt lift celebrity doctor to look into the history. I mean, these are just basic things that people don't even bother to get into anymore. And so it's easy for them to say, oh, they're just a bunch of racists. But really, the populist movement, as I see it, white, black, Hispanic, or anything else, is very interested in digging into the legitimate history of this country and how things have come to be so corrupt. And I think everybody sees that things are corrupt. The question is, who benefits from it, who's in on it, who's ignorant to it, and who wants to really see it changed.
Royce, we put your podcast 3 days a week when it's up on Getter. It gets a massive audience. I know you're doing a bunch of media over this week, given this you and what you stand for, but also what happened at CBS yesterday with the Trump one. Where do people get you? How do people find the schedule for the podcast? How do they find your writings, your books, and how do they find your content on social media?
You can find me on Royce White, at Royce White on Getter. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook for now, although on Twitter I'm suspended. The podcast is Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, usually on YouTube. That's Please Call Me Crazy, because, of course, the establishment wants everybody to believe that I'm crazy. I invite that. I wear it as a badge of honor. Please Call Me Crazy, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We also premiere on Rumble as well as all the major audio platforms. And you can also find us on War Room's Getter feed live.
Royce, if we were able to pull it off, would you debate Joy Ann Reid if somehow Getter or War Room could pull that off and provide a safe space for her to debate Royce White? Would you participate in that if we could set it up?
Listen, if the ground would crack open and Zigben himself would come from the abyss to take me down under before they allowed me to debate a black bourgeoisie grandstand sellout wearing a white woman's wig like Joy Ann Reid. She's nowhere near my caliber of breed. You know that.
Royce White, thank you very much, brother. So glad to have you on here. Great. By the way, The first tray you hit yesterday was unbelievable. Just a fabulous game. Big Three is building
Thank
every
you,
week.
brother.
It's so exciting. Cube, Jeff Quatnitz, the whole team over there. I got to tell you, it was impressive in Brooklyn. You guys in the playoffs are going to be in London. It's just incredible. So congratulations, and it was great to see you out there on the court.
Thank you, brother. Godspeed. Love you, man.
Thank you, my man. Royce White. Trump won on his skull. Colonel Alan West joins us now, Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union. Colonel West, I want to get to talk about General Brown for a second, but I'd like to give a second. If you could just take a minute to just make sure, refresh our audience's memory about your service and your family's service to this country.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry I had these internet problems. I'm in a hotel up here in D.C. My father, who was buried at Marietta National Cemetery, he was a corporal in World War II. He was wounded in Italy. My older brother was a Marine infantryman, and he was wounded during the Vietnam War. My father-in-law served 24 years, 2 tours of Vietnam with the Marical Division. Myself, I served 22 years, went from second lieutenant up to lieutenant colonel, commanded the battalion, 2 combat tours of duty, and then even after retiring, I was an advisor to the Afghan Army. And my nephew, my older brother's son, he is a lieutenant colonel in the Army right now, just took command of an artillery battalion last month, June. So and he's done 3 combat tours of duty as well. So we really pride ourselves in being, as you would say, the pointy end of the spear when it comes to defending this nation, and that's why national security and defense is a very important issue for me.
Okay, so Colonel West, one of the reasons you're in D.C., there's a big hearing coming up for who will be replace General Milley as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and obviously MAGA and President Trump have a huge set of problems with General Milley. General Brown, who's been nominated by the president to be his relief, is a highly decorated, highly respected Air Force general. So what is you and your family have been at the business end of the stick or the spear as far as our national security goes. What is your specific problem with General Brown?
Well, it's not a problem that I have with him. It's the issues that I think he needs to be asked about in this confirmation hearing. You know, I served on active duty at Fort Bragg, North Carolina with the current Secretary of Defense, General Lloyd Austin, when he was just a colonel and a brigade commander in the 82nd Airborne Division. What I want to make sure is that we don't have senior military leaders that still in uniform that are ideologues, and that's a big concern when you look at the lack of quality recruiting and retention that we have. Some of the things that have occurred strategically, the debacle in Afghanistan. And I think that this is an opportunity to make sure that we don't have someone that's just going to kowtow to the ideological agenda of the progressive socialist left and sacrifice our national security and our military readiness, capability, and capacity so that the left can say, you know, look, we've got, you know, the Pride Month thing, and we've got drag queen recruiters in the Navy. But yet, oh, by the way, the Navy told the Marine Corps they don't have enough amphibious assault craft for them to do what the Marine Corps' number one mission is, and that's amphibious landings and amphibious assaults. So one of the things that General Brown has said is that he really does seem to want to institute a quota system when it comes to combat aviators. He said that he is looking at only 46% of aviators being white males. Now, why would I be concerned about white males being, you know, combat aviators? I want the best combat aviators up there. And I think that General Brown, being a combat aviator himself, should go back and look at the lesson of the Tuskegee Airmen. They did not ask for quotas. They did not ask for any special treatment. They asked for one single thing: give us the opportunity to show that we can be the best fighter pilots. And that was point proven because they were the most highly requested fighter squadron escort from bombers, and those bombers were pretty much so white pilots. So that's what we want to have. We want to have equality of opportunity, not this equity in the quality of outcomes. So I think that's one of the critical questions we need to be asking this general in this Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on Wednesday.
I want to make sure I get this right, because you're so highly thought of by this audience. Is the Is your implication that when you knew General Austin when he was a colonel with the 82nd Airborne, was he an ideologue then? And do you think General Austin, as Secretary of Defense, has been an ideologue about this diversity, equity, inclusion mandate?
No, he was not, and that's why I looked up to him. You know, he was Panther 6. That was his call sign. I was a young major at the time, and, you know, I said, man, I'd love to grow up and be a Lloyd Austin. And even up to the point when he was a division commander of the 10th Mountain Division up in New York, Climb to Glory, he was someone to look up to. Now, I don't know what happens when people get too close to the Pentagon and start drinking water from the Potomac, but they start to lose their senses, even those in uniform. And so when I think about, you know, this Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, who signed a memo saying that female troops, or, you know, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, anyone that falls under his purview, they have to be prepared to share their latrine facilities with biological males. That's not, you know, helping the military. That doesn't help our readiness. You know, talking about making sure people are using the right pronouns, that's not helping our readiness. Or when you start emphasizing this gender dysphoria in our military, and I think we need to realize, Steve, that this is a mental condition. We don't allow people in the military, they have flat feet. You are not allowed to be in the military if you're overweight. You can't run fast enough. But now we're saying that if you're confused about whether you're a little boy or a little girl, you should be openly serving. And I think some of us just saw this recent video of this Army major that they were highlighting. That's not what the military should be about. The military should be about recruiting, then training, deploying, fighting, and winning, and taking care of our families. And taking care of our families is not about using taxpayer dollars to gender transition, if they want to call it that, is mutilating our children. But they want to do that to dependent children in our military, as well as puberty blockers and hormonal therapies. So I don't want to see a new incoming chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that wants to drink that poison water and become, as I said, an ideologue. I want someone that wants to be a leader and restore the capability and capacity of our military to be a credible deterrent force to our enemies.
Colonel West, if you had the opportunity to ask General Brown at his hearing a couple of questions, what would they be?
Well, I would start out by asking him about Afghanistan. I would ask him if he agreed with the withdrawal and that policy that we use in Afghanistan. Why would he have recommended that we abandon Bagram Air Base and $80 billion of equipment? I would ask him about the whole COVID issue and forcing and mandating these shots upon our servicemen and women and the detrimental effect that it had on them. And would he allow these men and women to come back into the military with full pay and benefits recovered? And I would ask him also, would he have an investigation into some of the withholding of information about the detrimental effects that shot had on our men and women in the military, myocarditis and several other things. I would ask this general if he would look to, you know, get rid of these high-paying administrative positions. I mean, your previous guest talked about the administrative state. Why we have these new political commissars in the military called, you know, DEI officers and things of this nature? That's not helping our military when you're talking about breaking us down in this cultural Marxism that pits one race against another race. That doesn't build unit cohesion. And then I'd ask them about how do we restore our capability capacity. I mean, the Navy is now being outpaced by the Chinese. They have more surface warships and vessels than we do. Or look at what is happening in Ukraine. I mean, what's his position on that? And the fact that now we are running out of 155 millimeter ammunition, and as an artilleryman, that's pretty important to me. How do we make sure that we sustain our own training and readiness and our own ammunition stockpiles and capabilities? So those are some of the questions I'd be asking.
Colonel West, before we lose you, by the way, great questions. Before we lose you, can you give us a minute on the American Constitutional Rights Union, which you're now the executive director of?
Yes, the American Constitutional Rights Union has been around for about 27, 28 years. It was founded by members of the Reagan administration. Attorney General Ed Meese is still a founding board member with us, and Robert Carlson, who was the architect of Reagan's welfare reform, and the ACRU was meant to be a bulwark against the ACLU. We're looking to be that response, and we focus on our constitutional rights and First Amendment, Second Amendment, election integrity is very big. We have a program called Protecting Vulnerable Voters because we realize how much the left is going after seniors in these living facilities and care centers, and so those are some of the things that we do. But without a doubt, we are definitely in the realm of national security and protecting our veterans and our defense as well, because if we don't do that, we don't have a country. And I think that's why it's so important. And I'm up here, and the National Defense Authorization Act is also coming up for a vote on the House floor this week. And so I'm also going to be talking to some House Armed Services Committee members about that because I used to be on the HASC.
Congressman, what is your social media? Where do people get you?
People can get me on all the social media platforms, Getter, Rumble, not the TikTok because I don't do the Chinese Communist Party, and they can also follow me on YouTube, the Steadfast and Loyal podcast, which drips throughout the week.
Colonel Alan West, honored to have you on here. Great questions for General Brown. We will make sure we'll promulgate these. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Steve. God bless.
Ukraine. Thank you, brother. We're going to Rome, and we're going to talk about Ukraine next in the War Room.
With Stephen K. Bannon.
No, cluster bombs should never be used. That's crossing a line. Once you see what takes place, we know what takes place in terms of cluster bombs being very dangerous to civilians. They don't always immediately explode. Children can step on them. That's a line we should not cross. I think the president's been doing a good job managing this war, this Putin aggressive war against Ukraine, but I think that this should not happen. He had to ask for a waiver under the Foreign Assistance Act just to do it because we have been preventing the use of cluster bombs since, I believe, 2010.
So when Putin started using cluster bombs, the Biden White House said that would potentially be a war crime. Do you think that, therefore, the U.S. government, the Biden administration, will potentially be engaging in war crimes if this goes forward?
What I think is that we would risk losing our moral leadership because when you look at the fact that over 120 countries have signed the convention on cluster munitions saying they should never be used, they should never be used. And in fact, many of us have urged the administration to sign on to this convention. And so I'm hoping that the administration would reconsider this because these are very dangerous bombs, they're dangerous weapons, and this is a line that I don't believe we should cross.
Okay, welcome back. As Colonel West just left us, he talked about the National Defense Authorization Act. That's going to be debated and probably voted on this week. We're going to have a lot to say about that over the next couple of days. I want to bring Ben Harnwell in here, and that, Ben, you've really done an amazing job of breaking down this entire Ukraine situation. Right now, you got Biden heading to this big NATO meeting. You've had all this controversy about the spring offensive or the counteroffensive, whatever you want to call it, clearly not getting traction. That's why the United States, and Biden said the quiet part out loud, he said, hey, we're running out of ammo. That's why we got to give them the cluster bombs. And we've also got the whole Wagner thing is now, everybody's coming to the point of what you and Jack Posobiec said live on air Saturday, a couple of weeks ago when it was happening. Just walk us through this entire mess right now. You got the NATO meeting. They're in, they're out. They may be out. They may be in. You got the U.S. now potentially going to commit what Biden's administration said of war crimes by providing them these cluster ammunition because they're out of ammo. And the reason they're out of ammo, these are two Slavic entities that are just slugging it out. And I mean, the types of firepower they're using on each other in the charnel house of eastern Ukraine it's reaching World War I levels. Ben Harnwell.
Good evening, Steve. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to pick up from the cold open that we just had. On Saturday's show, the woman possibly will remember that we were illustrating how the fact that it would appear that the Democratic Party mainstream media complex was in the process of throwing Joe Biden under the bus in good time to pick up another candidate ahead of 2014, because they realize he's just going to he's just basically a senile corpse that is barely capable of walking around or answering yes or no questions. Very credit to Jake Tapper, right? He asked the right question. Steve, isn't it fascinating that Congresswoman Lee wasn't able to answer that question with a straight no, basically? No, the use of of cluster bombs would not open the administration up to war crimes litigation. She couldn't answer it. Doesn't that speak absolute volumes about the current state of the Democratic Party, the Biden administration, and the execution of this war? I was astonished, absolutely astonished. Great question. She couldn't say no to it, and that is, I think, something that we're going to be hearing a lot more of over the course of the next 12 months. We certainly ought to hear a lot more about that. So coming to the Wagner escapades, as you correctly said, the three of us in you, Posso, we independently from one another came to the same conclusion, and perhaps with different adjustments. But as the events unfolded on Saturday, the 24th of June, and the supposed coup, we all said, this is no coup. This is not a coup. Whatever else is happening, whatever else this is about, it's not a coup. And then, of course, about less than an hour after that show finished, the news came out of this supposed compromise out of nowhere that had been brokered by President Lukashenko of Belarus. Now, every moment, Steve, that a new fact has emerged to do with the 24th, because it is absolutely important. What is going on in Russia, Belarus, with Wagner is important for the development of this war. Every fact that comes out, it seems to suggest that there was something more there going on than what the rest of the world's mainstream media was happily lapping up, breaking out the champagne, saying that Putin's regime is on the verge of civil war. It does appear that there's something else going on. So we've had a diet over 20 years in the West, and since Putin's been president, that he's a guy who pushes his political opponents out of windows, that there are people in prison simply for calling the war, the special military operation, but it is a war. Calling it a war, you go to prison for that, and people have gone. That Putin is some kind of crazy tyrant who will polonium-210 you, even if you've gone off to a different country, or you'll be sort of overdosed with the Novichok nerve agent. Steve, how do you make sense? How does one make sense of the fact that Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, said today that on the 29th of June, 5 days after this sort of existential event, supposedly, Putin received Prigozhin and 34 of his commanders in the Kremlin and had a 3-hour session with them, right? This does not seem to me to be the actions of a man who is
Hang on. Slow down, because this is so central to this whole narrative. I want to go back and make sure you get the time. So the coup, supposedly we covered live on the Saturday show, was the 24th of June, and just broke to this morning. What is it? And by the way, you can tell the mainstream media doesn't know how to handle this, so they don't know what to do with it. The report today is that Prigozhin and how many of his commanders met with Putin on what day? 34 of his field officers met with Putin. How many days after the 24th?
5 days, on the 29th of June, for a 3-hour session. And Peskov was sort of really vague about what the meeting was about. So, they gave their version of the events, basically. Now, look, the Warming Posse will know that I have my own theory with regards to what Saturday was about. In 10 seconds, I think it was simply just like the most genius act of deception and diversion that I've ever seen in military history. They successfully withdrew Wagner, all their equipment, all their munitions, all their troops. They withdrew them out of Ukraine without the Ukrainians firing a single shot. moved up north towards Moscow, and then went due west into Belarus, which, as I keep repeating, from its southernmost point to the outskirts of Kiev is 48 miles. And the world basically just watched this happen and cheering it along. So
hold on, hang on. I want to make sure. Hang on. I want to make sure the War and Posse understands what Ben said, and he said this at the time when we were doing it live, and all these other people with knitted brow. This is the end of Putin. He says, "Hey, you know, they're kind of taking these guys from the front line around Bakhmut and taking them in the thousands of miles away, but under the cover that we're going to Moscow. Oh, they really cut a deal. They're going to Belarus instead. They're taking a hard left." And in the shape of Ukraine, where they end up is instead of thousands, hundreds and hundreds of miles away off a battlefield you have to fight for, they're taking them from the front line in the eastern fight and putting them 48 miles from a strike on Kiev in case anything gets untoward. That's essentially what happened, is it not, Ben Harnwell? Well, with a stop off in Moscow for a debriefing with the boss.
Now this guy, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who addresses President Putin as Papa, in that kind of familiar terms, he's also stopped off in St. Petersburg a few days ago. We did cover this again on the War Room. Supposedly to pick up a few rifles and pistols of sentimental value. One of those pistols, by the way, was gifted to him by Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, with whom he's supposed to sort of have a warlord-like rivalry, and he also, but it's not even though the headlines there were centered on the picking up of pistols and rifles from the FSB headquarters, the new version of the KGB headquarters in St. Petersburg. He also picked up in rubles $100 million worth of rubles before going on his way. Steve, it doesn't seem to me like that Putin, this man that we've been led to believe is like an ogre, like that treats dissidents like Saddam Hussein or Stalin. Something is not right about this. But there he is. That I think is one of the developments from today. Another one which is really important, but I'll just recap that. This man who supposedly led a coup against one of the most brutal regimes, apparently, in the world, was received by the person he tried to overthrow for 3 hours, along with his top commanders. So the Warring Posse is more than capable of making of that what they will, unlike the rest of the world's commentariat. Something else, Steve, I don't know how much time you're going to give me, which is really, really important for the European Union, for NATO, and it has dynamics with regards to the defense of the Judeo-Christian West as well. President Erdogan of Turkey, freshly re-elected, for the world's mainstream media, surprise re-elected last month, after all the usual suspects would have been there in Turkey trying to destabilize his re-election. Freshly empowered and mandated by the Turkish people, he has said in Vilnius, because right now the annual meeting of NATO is taking place, ostensibly to discuss what to do with President Zelensky's insistent request to join NATO. President Erdogan has said that he's going to block Sweden from joining the alliance unless the European Union allows Turkey to join, and he's called on President Biden to give very strong and firm support to Turkey's position. Now, this is an outstanding. I didn't see this coming. It is an outstanding play on behalf of Erdogan, because here's why. I don't know. We also need to talk about the rise of the far right, as the New York Times splashed in its article today. nothing will encourage what the New York Times calls as the far right parties and the movements across the European Union, then letting Turkey into the European Union. It will be absolutely catastrophic for the mainstream, so supposedly mainstream centre right parties, for the mainstream centre left parties, and they're both communist iterations. Obviously, nothing will hit them and damage them more, and they already know that their grasp on control is slipping out of their fingers. Nothing will encourage these economic nationalist, populist nationalist movements across the European continent than letting Turkey in. So there's no way that can be allowed. I think Erdogan knows this. What he's doing is positioning Turkey quite incredibly well, I think. And of course, it's more than within his capability also to say, well, forget Sweden. We'll veto Ukraine. To join NATO does require unanimity. We'll veto Ukraine unless we're allowed into the European Union. And then we will have the situation that a very strong Russia ally will be, that is to say, Turkey will be not only a member of the alliance, but also a member of the European Union. But I don't think that's going to happen. But that has thrown it was a blindside pitch. No one saw that coming, and that has somewhat dominated these events to do with Ukraine. Now, NBC News, I don't know if Denver can pick up the third article that I've sent through. NBC News says that the big question, according to them, is whether Zelensky is going to show up to this Vilnius summit. He has been obviously formally invited, but he's yet to confirm his attendance. And his officials are saying that the president is not yet clear about what he's being promised at the summit. And further on, NBC adds that Zelensky appears to be willing to stage something of a grand statement, i.e. not going, snubbing his invitation as an honoured guest, unless tangible assurances are offered. So here's a guy who is wholly dependent on Western support to fight an existential war against a far larger neighbour. And he's basically saying, he doesn't know whether he's going to come to the NATO meeting or not, unless they guarantee that they're going to spend even more money and what the nature of those guarantees are going to be. I don't understand. I swear to God, I don't understand how he's able to pursue this line of absolute condescension to other government leaders, and not one of them will say, well, hang on, mate, we've given a lot, we'll continue to give a lot, but we want to put out the interest of our own taxpayers and electorate and peoples first, as well as you do in your case.
Ben, we're going to take the rest. We got 5 minutes in the show, and clearly you've done such a magnificent job on this. I want this audience, and we're going to close tonight with this, and we'll be back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. But this is like a bombshell of bombshells. If you think about the United States military, the Secretary of the Navy came out about 3 months ago and said, hey, by the way, if we keep sending the ammo at the rate we're sending it to Ukraine, we're going to be out of ammo to defend Taiwan and the South China Sea. And of course, they immediately shut him down. It was a tweet. He had to untweet it, take it down, said, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. You've had Biden just say, hey, the reason we're sending the cluster bombs, which heretofore we said was a war crime to use, is because we're out of ammo. The Brits are saying they're at ammo. The United States, we're putting in $5 billion a month. $1 billion of that, I think, is going to the pensions. Zelensky has gotten everything he's wanted. People have pushed it, F-16s, tanks, all of it. The spring offensive is a disaster. And here, because Biden says, hey, because the pressure put on it by this audience to the Republican Party to cut out not one more supplemental, now one more $100 billion supplemental to the defense budget. That's what we're going to be fighting about this week. If Biden says, hey, you're going to have to really finish the war, which you say is take Crimea. We got to finish the war and get peace before we can even consider letting in NATO. Zelensky, like a spoiled kid, throws the toys out of the pram and just says, I don't know if I'm going to come or not going to come. I mean, think what a punk. Everything people's done. I don't know. I might come. I don't know if you got the right terms. A conditioned precedent would have to be a path for us to get there. This is what we're dealing with. And this is what the mainstream media and MSNBC and CNN, you created this monster. He is your monster. You created him, and now it's like a tar baby. He's going to be stuck to you, Ben Harnwell.
Absolutely right, Steve. It's an astonishing state of affairs. Now, I just mentioned how much time do I have quickly to hoover up the last?
You got about 2 minutes. We got about 2 minutes. Yeah.
All right. There's a very good article in the New York Times. I'll just do the headline and people can search it up because it basically puts the backdrop of everything we've just been discussing. Headline: It's by Jason Horowitz. The article in the New York Times: Far-right parties are rising to power around Europe. Is Spain next? And it's a pearl-clutching exercise for fear that political movements that are close to the people are growing in strength. Steve, I'm going to end with a question. Mike Pence has suggested that if Ukraine loses the war, America should send troops to fight Russia. Warren Posse, if you want to make your voice known on that suggestion, you need to come to my profile on Getter, which is my surname, at Harnwell, and vote, because I've got a poll open for the next 2 days. So should, if America loses the war, should America send troops to fight Russia? Your alternative answers are no and hell no. So pick wisely, choose wisely which of those responses you want. And the comments are fantastic. That's at Harnwell on Getter.
I will go check it out. Ben, you've done an extraordinary job from your perch in the Eternal City. And Jason Horowitz is a top reporter over there, lives in Rome. We know him very well. That article is the flip side of what the Davos and Brussels have done in forcing this war, escalating this war at every aspect of it. People over there are tired of paying for it, and they're certainly tired of supporting the fighting of it. Ben, we got to bounce. Great job. As always, thank you very much for staying up and joining us here in the War Room. Okay, we'll be back at it at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, all week. This is going to be on fire. The House is back. The investigations are ramping up. Big fight of the National Defense Authorization Act. We're going to be getting into all of it. We got so much to cover in so little time, but we'll see you back here at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning when you will be in the War Room.